everyone for this talk today in the run-up to the Jyotish Mela. Michael Sugarman, who is here, is going to be our primary speaker. Emily here is going to be eliciting all the responses from him. I see a lot of us are here together who have been in the cohort of Penny. Lots of us have been studying together. I think it would be a travesty if I say that, we have all been studying together, although I said that some of us, yeah, we were in the same class, but some of us were, there more as a tutor or more as a, senior student, and some of us are just newbies. So I am actually definitely were in the newbie, category. There was Michael, who was always sitting on the sofa in the back, only chiming in once in a while when needed, and whenever he had some tidbits to share. And there were Emily and Rohit, who were probably in the senior students category. I definitely see some more people who I believe were also part of that group. It's heartening to see that some of you have gone ahead. Emily is teaching, doing lots of different things. Michael has obviously always been teaching and consulting, has a new book that has come out. And he will be speaking at the Jyotish Mela, which is starting on 2nd and going on till 12th of June. So this is a talk in the run up to that. And, I don't want to get into a very lengthy introduction kind of a thing here for now. But let's get started. And Meenakshi, if you want to take a couple of minutes and quickly talk about the Jyotish Mela before we get started with the actual talk, I think that would be great.
Yes. So thank you, Saurav, for that. And there we go. So before you get started, just wanted to very quickly, I think people already know about Jyotish Kumbh, which is starting this Thursday, June 2nd. It's going to be running for whole 11 days, starting 2nd, and it will be go till 12th. It has a very good gathering of many astrologers which are coming also from India as well as from the US different parts. So in the beginning, to start with, you will see Dr. Charak, Vinay, Aditya, Michael Sugarman, Linda McKay, and Marc Boney. In the beginning, they will be staying for the whole session. And then from the middle, you will also start seeing more astrologers coming in. Brendan Feeley will be coming in the middle. Ellen Anand will be coming. Then you will be seeing PV Narasimha Rao, Simon Chokoisky. So there are names which I'm saying, going to be showing up in person. At the same time, there are people who are like Roni Dreyer, I'm forgetting. Then you will see few people who will also be joining us online. They will be presenting online, will be the Gudrun, Komilla, Sutton, and VP Goel. They could not come in person, but they will be virtually attending the session. Little bit of highlights. There are multiple things planned, which you see the names over here. The highlights of the session is we have multiple topics which are new showing up, which happen to be some of the special webinar we have been doing, will also be an highlight in the Jyotish conference. So you can look into it's a wide variety of topic coming from all over the place. So when we will start the inaugural lecture, we'll also have a session for astrology, destiny, and karma, and it will be a complimentary session for the people to join in the KS Charak. So the session will start on 8:15 on Thursday. That day we'll be have a inaugural lecture, which will be after the blessing of Swamiji. We'll have a Charak talking about, then it will followed by the rest of the session. So we have a multiple things coming. So people who are still kind of not signed up, so we have a good registration so far. If you are still interested, you can reach out to us at ms@jyotish.com. Few names which I had forgotten to speak about is the Michiel Boender, Linda McKay, and Mavis given, and also the new name, which is the first time he's going to speak with us, is the Purnamurti. We will have a special session coming up from him in the middle. Another thing I will say, so this is a kind of a repetition of how it is going in for the schedule, how it is showing up. So there is a lot of attraction pretty much from the Wednesday, I will say from the middle of the session till the end. We will have a session also in the evening, new astrological session, either the life event by measure, how to predict life measure event by Marc Boney, or on the last days where the PB Narasimha Rao is coming, and we are talking a lot on the mundane astrology. So that has been one of the attraction this time, especially when we are going through the Russian and the Ukraine war. So people wanted to, there was a special, I will say, a request from the people to talk a lot about. So you will see those topics also showing up to our sessions. With that, I would like to not take a lot of time into this. Instead, only thing I will mention is again happening in Ashtavidya Gurukulam, and we request people, if you are, even if you are online, do try to show up for a few days so that the people who are coming there, you will be able to see them. So with that, I would like to move on to go more towards the interview, the reason we came here for, and we are very delighted for the Emily being our host to be able to ask us the question. So before I pass it over to Emily, I would like to take few minutes to talk about the people who do not know Emily, how it is. So Emily, first, before I make any introduction, a great dear friend and colleague of us from the Penny Pharaoh class. And while in professionally, she is a clinical practitioner of Ayurveda as well as a lifelong student of Jyotish. She has been trained and guided by multiple great, I will say, teachers and the guru she got blessed with. She has learned Ayurveda from the place of Dr. Vasant Lad and Dr. A.R. Ramadas, as well as she has learned the grace of the Jyotish from the Penny Pharaoh. So with that, I would like to pass it on. She is again a great dear friend. She has been practicing Jyotish for very long. So, and she is a dear friend of the Michael Sugarman as well. So we would like to pass it over to Emily to introduce Michael, and we'll get started with the interview. So Emily, all yours.
Thank you so much, Meenakshi, and hello, Sarah and Michael. It's so wonderful to be here with friends. And as Sarah already said, I'll introduce a man who probably doesn't need an introduction today, but Michael Sugarman is an author, accomplished Vedic astrologer, and a psychologist by training. And he personally is a man who has found more truth and guidance, hope and redemption in the science of astrology than in any other philosophy or system of divination. And he tries to always consider it a gift that he has been given. Michael has been blessed by the wisdom and the knowledge he has received and continues to receive from a series of very wise, highly informed, and generous teachers. Some of these teachers whom Michael has studied with include Juliana Swanson, Dr. Charak, of course, Vinay, Aditya, Chakrapani, Gayatri, Devi Raman, Penny Pharaoh, and Marc Boney. And as well as taken a lot of information and understanding from the books and recordings of Mr. K.N. Rao. So, Michael, what an honor to be here with you today and have the opportunity to pick your brain and to hear about your life and what is going on for you in this really extraordinary moment in time. And first off is the fact that you, sir, have just written a book. You are a published author, Addiction in Vedic Astrology Charts. And I'd love to just start there with a big congratulations. I know that's no small feat. And ask you just what was the inspiration to write a book on addiction?
Hi, Emily. Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that very much. And you're looking quite bright for a little bit early in the morning, Mountain Daylight Time.
Well, it's 9. The Brahma Muhurta is like well past.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I guess you know, I had been actually on and off writing about addiction in the Vedic astrology chart. I'd been on and off writing about it for a number of years, and sort of collecting charts and people's stories. And it all sort of came together over the last year. My daughter, Cora, who someday I think will be taking over my astrology practice and inheriting all of my literature and, you know, books and all that, and charts. Eventually, I think that'll happen. And when it does, you know, I'm sure she'll take it even farther than what I've been able to do with Jyotish. Right now, she is in a Rahu Venus period, and she said if she ends up meeting someone and getting into a relationship, then she will take up the study of Vedic astrology seriously. So, so we're keeping our fingers crossed. Anyway, with her help, we, you know, put together this little book. I have several sections in the book. There's a section, of course, having to do with just people who have the disease of alcoholism, and then we had sections about recovery and the timing of recovery, and that took a little longer to put together because I needed to find folks who were willing to have their chart used. Of course, we can't provide birth data, but or any other way of identifying who they are, but at least getting the story, you know, of how and when someone decided to cease the use of alcohol or other drugs. My motive, I think, in writing it is just as a contribution, because I had so much wonderful education with Dr. Charak primarily and some others, but I had so much wonderful education and opportunity around learning medical astrology. And this I think of as a small contribution to the realm of medical astrology. If we regard addiction as a disease, which is the way that it is primarily regarded by the mental health treatment system, by the, you know, medical health treatment system these days, addiction is thought of as an illness, progressive and incurable, but treatable illness. And when we think of it that way, it makes it, well, much more humane and much more treatable. And that was the context that I wanted to address the whole phenomenon of addiction, and then begin to represent some of the ways that I began to see it manifesting in charts. In other words, at the very outset, I would get a chart of someone with the disease of addiction, and I would wonder, you know, how did this get created? And then as I got more and more charts and began to study it more and more seriously, like anything, you begin to see consistent indicators. No matter what you're looking for in Jyotish, if you kind of go about it in a you know, in an objective manner, a slightly detached manner, and you're just collecting data, collecting charts, and then you begin to see patterns. And this is certainly how we were taught, and this is how I wanted to look at the whole phenomenon. So, and I, sure enough, began to see those patterns in the charts of folks that were addicted or had addictive illness. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but there's, of course, you know, more to say about it.
Absolutely. Oh, it's fascinating, Michael. I just think about how addiction plagues so many people. And to think that in the astrology chart, we can actually, you know, see this potentiality in a person's life, or, you know, what sounds even more exciting to me is to see that somebody actually would have the possibility to recover from addiction. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And of course, on the occasion when I'm talking to someone about their chart or the chart of a friend or family member, um, and discussing the phenomenon of addiction, we're always looking at it as there's no better time to go about the process of recovery than the present, that now is the best time to, embark on that. But, in some cases, people, very unfortunately, tragically, don't get into the process of recovery. In other cases, they do. There are basically, I'll say there's 4 sections in the book. And there is a section dedicated to charts of folks who maybe did not have addictive illness themselves, but have a friend, family member, coworker, spouse, that kind of thing with the problem. And I would say more than talking to someone who's got the problem themselves, and that does still come up. Certainly in my practice, I do, with some regularity, I do talk to people who are dealing with an addictive process, alcohol or some drug, or perhaps a process addiction. But I would say with a little more frequency, I find myself talking to people who say, in the course of the reading, I will learn one way or the other. Maybe I have a suspicion based on the chart, but wanting to go about the reading in an organic, natural way and creating an opening for them to begin to talk about it if it's something they want to discuss, that they will tell me, yes, they have a son or daughter, or the spouse, or a close friend, a parent, something, anybody who is dealing with that or has dealt with it in the past. As we know from the whole phenomenon of growing up in alcoholic family, even if the parent or the caretaker that we grew up with, maybe they're not even alive anymore, or not drinking or taking drugs anymore, that can still leave a powerful effect on an individual who grows up around that sort of chaotic experience. So I did include a section about recognizing in someone else in the chart where that possibility would exist. We started in that section with the chart of Tatum O'Neal, the Hollywood actress who, of course, had an alcoholic, drug-addicted mother, and then the way that shows up in the chart. She also has a brother, and from Tatum's chart and brother's chart, her brother's name is Griffin O'Neal, and from their charts, it's pretty easy, actually, pretty dramatic to see the affliction to mother, and especially what went in the mouth of the mother as far as being addicted. So that is that was a section in the book that I pretty much enjoyed writing. I had someone who I think the last chart in that section is from someone that I happened to meet who had grown up with an alcoholic mother, and I asked her, would you be willing to provide a quote, a little bit of a description of your experience, which she did very kindly. So that's in there as well, and along with her chart, of course. So yeah, and it's been rewarding, and there's been some response to the book, and I wasn't aware, and it's very possible that it's out there, but I was not aware of anything else being written about addiction in the chart, and how specifically to zero in on it and see it and understand it. from the perspective that I was taking. So if it's out there, I'd love to know about it. But so far, mostly through the bookstore at Arsha Vidya, and also, hunting around other places and looking around online, I had not really seen anything specifically dedicated to this particular medical phenomenon.
Yeah, it's the first book of this type that I've seen. And for those of you who don't have the book yet, it's available on Amazon, and definitely recommend getting that into your shopping cart. And so, Michael, what would you say, what is the takeaway for students in your book?
Well, a couple things, and that's a wonderful question. Thank you for that question, Emily. Takeaway would be one, that if someone is actually finding themselves in the role of being an astrologer, I would like to think that being an astrologer is also being a counselor. That I don't imagine, or it's hard for me to conceive of, being a day in, day out practicing Vedic astrologer, or Western for that matter, but it's hard for me to imagine being in that role day in, day out, and not having or cultivating a set of counseling skills at the same time. It seems to me that the two are, very much intertwined. That in most cases, when I'm giving an astrological reading, there has to be a certain amount of give and take, some subtlety, some understanding of the natural process by which we learn about ourselves and then go about maybe making changes in our own life. And certainly for me, the astrology chart is always an opportunity for change, redemption, improvement, understanding, insight, all of those things. So I have learned that, not that I necessarily ever quite did this, but, maybe in one way or another, you don't hit someone over the head at the beginning of the reading and say, oh, it looks like you grew up with an alcoholic father. What was that like? If that subject comes up in the course of the conversation, in the course of the reading, it'll be a little bit down the line where a person has opened up and learned to trust and is willing to share a little bit more about their lives. So one takeaway is the importance of counseling and counseling skills. You don't want to say to someone in a reading, I wouldn't have children if I were you because it looks like it would be disastrous, or at least not put it that bluntly. Again, you want to get to a point of trust and understanding in the reading, and if the person asks certain specific questions, that's when you might want to, about that subject or any subject, that's when if you're reading something that appears to be under a certain amount of stress in the chart, then you want to represent it at least in an understanding, compassionate, maybe delicate way. So that's one takeaway. Is that the astrologer should have some counseling skills. And of course, I'm sure, Emily, you and I both, and many others have heard the horror stories of the astrologer who, 5 minutes into the reading says, well, you'll never be married, so give up on that. We have heard those stories, and I've certainly have had any number of readings with people who have told me some of the things that they were told in an astrology reading, which may or may not have actually turned out to be accurate, but left them, kind of devastated. I mean, if we are, in fact, if we have any skill in astrology, and we're looking at the chart, which is the map of the person's life, and the deeper we go into this knowledge, the better able we are to really see not just the obvious indications of events or tendencies in the person's life, but the subtle ones, where the person may struggle. Or have, adverse events or tendencies in their life. So it's really important, I think, to just have that degree of compassion where, if there's a difficult area that we're going to be discussing or the person brings it up, we want to approach it the way we want to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and think, okay, what would this be like if someone was telling me, to expect a certain amount of adversity or difficulty, or how to mitigate that difficulty or adversity that might be coming along. So that's one takeaway, I think, that does kind of, I hope, come across in this book. Let's see, I guess others would be, obviously the phenomenon of addiction being understood as an illness as opposed to immoral behavior or weak-mindedness or, being possessed by demons and, all of the ways that addiction has been thought of over the years and the centuries. Just that, more as a, like I say, as a medical phenomenon. And I suppose, the just the multiple ways that a chart can be regarded. You think about someone like Tatum O'Neal, highly successful actress in her life. Starting with that movie Paper Moon, and she won an Oscar, I think, when she was 9 or 10 years old. So hugely successful person. And there are certainly ways to see that in the chart. But then here we find out about this rather horrific set of experiences growing up with her mother and to a certain extent with her father, Ryan O'Neal. And so here, the chart just unfolds its complexity because we all live very complex lives, strength and gifts in certain areas, and then challenges and adversity in other areas. We might make a lot of money in our life, but we might also have, certain kinds of illness or disease or other sorts of problems. And it takes time in the process of studying a specific chart. It takes a great deal of time and patience, I find anyway, as I'm working my way into a chart. The chart does not reveal itself to me within the first 15 or 20 minutes or half hour or even the first hour. I don't know if that's true for you, Emily, but for me, it's still a process of living with the chart for a length of time before it starts to unfold some of its subtlety and complexity, and I get a better understanding of the richness of the person's life. However that may manifest itself, I get a much better understanding, after some time. I make a joke and say that I actually, I don't just look at the chart on the computer. I typically print it, and I make a joke and say, I put it under my pillow at night. And maybe that's not completely true, but it's not far from the truth, as far as just, living with a chart for a certain period of time, maybe, at least several days before the reading. I only do one reading a day. Whenever possible. Most of the time, that is my schedule, and I've been very blessed that I have not been overwhelmed with, so much business that I just can't handle it, and I have to start doing two or three readings a day, as opposed to it never dries up either. So I don't know, this is just the gift of the Jyotir Vidya, I guess, is just that I've been able to just offer one reading a day. I prepare, study for that reading, give the reading, and then there's always an after effect where I'm still thinking about what I've maybe learned from talking to the person, learned about their life, their chart, and for me, I want to sit with that for some time, as a learning process, as opposed to jumping into the next chart and just being done with it. So for that reason, I've pretty much stayed with that schedule, and it has served me well. So again, that's kind of a long-winded answer to a very good question. What the takeaways are, but just essentially that. And I think, we were taught this at Arsha Vidya, at least I feel like I was pretty clearly, and it is always the underlying assumption, the undertone, the foundation of our learning is that there's really only one very simple purpose behind Jyotish, and that is the illumination and inspiration that we can offer to people in their lives. Maybe sometimes that comes across as a bit of a warning. Okay, watch out for your health in this area, that area. Drive carefully, if we see potential for an accident. But we are not, I don't think, at least the way I've understood all this, we are not at all in the process of, sabotaging an individual's hopes and dreams. Or their best vision of themselves. We want to find the strength, the gifts in the chart and elevate the person as much as possible. And so that aspect of it is very, very simple, I think. And then how do you approach this from addiction? Well, you approach addiction as something that is treatable, and that there are, even if we are living with someone else or having to see someone else in the throes of an addictive process, there is still a way that a person can learn to manage that somewhat better, or understand it better, or understand their choices better as they're going through that sort of life experience. So I hope that's answered the question.
Oh, absolutely, Mike. That was beautiful, your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I'm wondering, do you feel that suicidal tendencies and addiction, do you feel like there's a relationship? And if so, is it possible to see this in the astrology chart?
Yeah, it certainly is possible. I mean, I guess we would have to see a combination of factors. And as we know for sure, addicted people do run a higher suicidal risk than people that do not have an addiction of one kind or another. And I suppose, there is a pro forma that I've kind of begun to understand as far as the risk of suicide, having been exposed to a number of suicide charts, and also having had clients who had a relative or friend or someone who did, make that unfortunate decision to take their own life. There is some overlap. I will say that where I've learned to identify the potential for addiction, it's an interesting thing because for suicide, because suicidal tendency will be seen generally with negation of the third house or third lord, meaning third house being our essential courage, will to live, will to sort of make our mark in the world, will to be recognized, expressed. Some people say third house is ego. I don't know if it's quite that simple, but generally, I would say if there's some, very compelling negation of third house, third lord, usually that negation would involve Ketu and Saturn more primarily than other grahas. That's where I've seen suicidal potential or suicidal attempts, or the actual completed suicide. So, and addiction is going to show up primarily with affliction. I mean, with some nuance and some complexity that I go into in the book, but, to see addiction or addictive tendency in a chart, we're going to see affliction to the second house, which is what goes in and out of the mouth. As a lot of us know, an addictive, especially in the case of alcohol or something that is, smoked, I mean, generally, the consumption occurs through the mouth. And we also know that when a person is in the active stages of their addiction, they may not always be truthful. They may not always be telling the truth. So that's what comes out of the mouth, the kind of speech, the quality of speech. And so it's, it's a two-edged sword there. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it is, it's an interesting thing to consider. I suppose where I have made the best use of suicidal potential in a chart is talking to a parent, let's say, of an adolescent or someone in their early 20s or something. I have a lot of parents who want me to look at charts of their kids, and they have concern about the child's mental well-being, and I get the chart of the child. And if there is this risk, I don't know if I probably would never say, oh, your child's going to kill themselves. I would say, make sure that any manifestation that you see in this kid of depression, depressive illness, what you might perceive as a lack of willpower or lack of direction, ongoing chronic depression, be sure that gets treated. I think probably that's how I would express it in the reading.
Mm-hmm. Preventatively, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And in one case, fairly recently, I have had the person's backstory was that the spouse had taken their own life at some point, back a number of years ago, and the person wanted to know, does this show up in the chart? Does this show up? Widowhood, does it show up in my chart? And the actual fact that the spouse would have chosen to take their own life. And I said, well, yes, absolutely, it's there. It could be seen in the chart.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, there's a great question in the chat, Michael, and this is Sarah. Then he's asking if you've looked at addiction and mental health more from the mundane perspective, as well as like individually. So thinking about just how like societies and groups and maybe even this moment in time, we're just, I mean, what is your take on that?
On the bigger perspective, I haven't looked at it that much. I know that what is generally considered the chart of the United States, that we are in a Rahu period, fairly early in Rahu, if I have that right. And of course, Rahu can bring in so many different kinds of energies, and depending on how Rahu is aspected and how it is afflicted or not in the chart. But it's certainly, that is the bigger question that I'm probably not as informed or as skilled. I mean, I'm familiar with the whole concept of yugas that we're generally said to be in Kali Yuga. Yugas are ages, long ages, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. Kali Yuga is said to be the period when the four-legged table is only got 3 legs. That's Kali Yuga. But what I'm told over and over again is that we are on the brink of, we are in maybe a long period of Kali Yuga that is hundreds of thousands of years long. But within the Kali Yuga, we are supposedly on the brink of coming into a smaller Sat Yuga, Sat being more blissful, more positive, that we are on the edge. And I'm told within the next 100 or 200 years, we are supposedly moving into a period of Sat Yuga, smaller Sat Yuga period inside a longer Kali Yuga period. So, Rob, is that how you understand it? I saw you nodding a little bit.
Yeah, I think the Kali Yuga concept, obviously, definitely, I think I agree with that. If that's where we are, that's where we are. But I just, sorry to drag it, but I just remember that there was one statement I heard in one of the late night shows by one of the comedians, that one failed shoe bombing, and we all have to remove our shoes at the airport for years altogether now, right?
Yes.
And here we are, incidents after incidents, and it just seems that nothing can shake this up, and this has been going on for what, almost like 15, 16 years since I have been here in the States, right? So, I mean, no logical explanation, no, I just can't wrap my head around it. It's just bizarre. I mean, how is that even possible?
Yeah, that's an excellent consideration, an excellent concern. I mean, if Rahu, if nothing else, is a shadow planet that is very smoky, very cloudy, very deceptive, Rahu. Sometimes, not always, of course, nothing is 100%, but you encounter someone with a very afflicted Rahu in the second house of the chart, and what will you get? You may not always get the truth from that person. And so we are, collectively, if we are all in this Rahu period, then we're finding that, like you've just described, Saurabh, we're finding that sort of poking our way through the smoke and the cloud and, piercing the veil, that is difficult as far as getting to the truth of something, and that there is much, much, much misunderstanding and misdirection and confusion in the collective consciousness. And I would attribute a lot of that to the country itself being in a period of Rahu. So, the Rahu period, of course, is 18 years long, and in something like a country that lives longer than the standard lifetime of a human being, it certainly would be interesting to look at the last time the U.S. went through the 18-year Rahu period. We're probably going back, 120, 130 years, something like that, to just see what was the collective experience, what was the discussion, what was the subjective experience that people were going through, that the country was going through at the time. So that would be my answer. I mean, again, there are other astrologers. I know James Kelleher is one who does dedicate a certain amount of his time in his practice to mundane astrology and looking at charts of various countries, U.S. chart, other kinds of, phenomena that would give maybe a better picture of the worldwide, or at least the countrywide subjective experience. So, yeah, that's an excellent question. And maybe we can, I'm sure it'll come up some more at the Gurukulam, maybe in the, the panel discussion around world events, those panel discussions that happen every year that are very enlightening.
All right, Michael, I'm going to kind of shift our
Sure.
But I do want to say that my one memory of you that is so sweet and so precious is you and I at the Arshavidya bookstore, and you're just like piling astrology books into you're like, and this one, and this one, and you got this one. And so it's just so wonderful that you, a lover of astrology and the books that have been written, have your book out. And so again, I can't wait to, sink my teeth into it. So
Yeah. Thank you for that, Emily. Are you planning on being there, or are you going to be doing it remotely, or?
I don't have plans to be there in person, no. But that is the next question I do have for you is we'd love to know more about your association with Arshavidya and what are your topics of presentation at the Kumbh Mela?
Sure. So this year, I decided, having written this book about addiction and really over the last several years, really immersed in the whole topic and the whole phenomenon of addiction and addictive illness, I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different and a little more maybe, enlightening or inspirational, at least one of the presentations. So one of the presentations that I'm going to be doing is a set of charts where there is actual mystical experience, not simply a chart of someone, let's say, who had a lot of hope and faith and lived life in a faith-based way where they were just, where there was lots of belief. I am curious myself about these, like the woo-woo, the sort of the mystical experiences that are reported at times, and then the charts that show the possibility, the potential for these experiences. So we've got a collection of charts. And in some cases, they are people who are recognized saints and mystics, but not in every case. In a couple of cases, just everyday people who, report something or have had a certain kind of experience. So I wanted to have a discussion around that, and again, see the patterns, and then also just again a little bit of a investigation into an area that's already pretty well covered and understood, but just maybe a slightly different way of looking at eyesight in the chart and when it can be afflicted, when what can damage or limit the eyesight, literally. Just one aspect of medical astrology that I've been kind of curious about, and so there'll be a presentation on that as well. And certainly, since I'll be there in person, I mean, I'm always up for questions and just general conversation. That's one of the nicest aspects of being at the Gurukulam is the the liveliness, the intellectual liveliness, the curiosity, the openness of the discussions around Jyotish and what is manifested in the astrology chart. You asked just about my relationship to the Gurukulam itself, or I've started going there. Let's think, this is probably primarily the last 15, 16 years. I was lucky for a long time to have a counseling job in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and I would have 4, 5, 6 weeks a year vacation time, sometimes even a little bit more. And most of that vacation time every year I was spending at the Gurukulam. Once I discovered the place. And I always remember, and I tell this story, everyone's probably heard this story, but the first time that I went there and parked the car, went into the office, all set to get my room, make my payment. None of that. They weren't having any of that. The only question was, have you eaten yet? You've just had a long drive. Have you eaten? And that tells you everything you need to know about the Gurukulam. In fact, when I tell people about the place, I have to stop myself because sometimes the very first thing I talk about is the food. and and I have to catch myself, okay, maybe the person I'm talking to, maybe that's not what they really want to know. They want to know about the learning, and the community. But I sometimes, excuse me, sometimes the very first thing that I talk about is the food. So when I'm in control of my, my speech impulsiveness, then it'll be the second or third thing that I talk about, not the first. But in some ways, it deserves to be the very first thing, is the quality of the food and the love with which the food is prepared and offered and presented. That is a very important aspect of that place. It is one of the, attractive features to me. But just the overall friendliness, the community, the spiritual quality, the ease with which things get accomplished. If you've got the wrong room or something, you need to change a room, or the schedule needs to be adjusted in some way. It's always done very friendly, very easy, no stress. Things are achieved, most comfortably. And the learning is always very deep and profound. In other words, Jyotish is given the time and the attention and the subtlety that it deserves. Nowhere else that I know of, and I'm sure there are other places, but nowhere else that I know of where we can sit in a classroom and have the same chart up on the screen for an hour or two and discussing all of the intricacies, all of the subtleties of the chart. And the learning, the neurotransmitters are just firing away as we're learning and understanding something more deeply with an expert teacher, because there are so many of them who are invited to Arsha Vidya, including all the way from India, of course. So just all of these things combined, I feel like Arsha Vidya is my second home. And having not been able to be there in person for 2 years or a little bit more has been a real pinch. It's been a real stress in my life. So I'm looking forward to being back there. Of course, the bookstore, as we know, is also pretty amazing. Very wonderful bookstore. Nice big bookstore, again, with lots and lots and lots of books. Vedanta, Hinduism, yoga, Bhagavad Gita, Jyotish, all of these subjects are very, very thoroughly. There's a wide range, as you know, of literature that's offered in the bookstore there. So most of the books in my astrology bookshelves, when you pull the book off the shelf and you look on the back, there's the little Arsha Vidya sticker that's where the book has come from. And lots of books that you would not find anywhere else, probably in the country. Many, many, many books that are just exactly what you need on a certain subject. And if you were not in the Arsha Vidya bookstore, you'd have to be doing a very thorough search on the internet to find this precise book, but there it is in the bookstore. So, yeah, again, long answer.
Emily, I'm sorry to jump in, but
sure, please.
It reminded me. I was watching a recorded video of Pujya Swamiji, and he made exactly the same comment. He said, he met with somebody who had come to a retreat, and at the end of the retreat, because that he recognized that person was a first timer, and he asked them, so what did you like about Ashvidya Gurukulam? And that person went into a silence for about 5 seconds, and then said, food was excellent. So Swamiji says, okay, at least you like the food.
You know, a lot of attention and credit needs to be given because, and maybe it's just the difference between American fast food culture these days and Indian culture. You know, there's something to be said about that. But the dining room is, in some ways, it is the heart and soul of the Arsha Vidya community. You know, like I say, the love with which the food is prepared and presented, and the care and concern, and the expertise. I always say it's as good as you would get in any Indian restaurant, at least by my experience. So, and you know, the discussion at meals, leading up to the meal, standing in line, after the meal, just sitting, you know, having a cup of tea, people pulling out their chart. Can you tell me about my chart? You know, or what did you think of this particular point in the lecture that we heard this morning? These conversations are every bit as important, and that experience is every bit as important as anything else that takes place there.
Michael, listening to you talk about your love of Arsha Vidya, I start to wonder if you've got a special destiny with your second house, sir.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, I mean, I do have a certain amount of emphasis in my chart on the 12th house, which Arsha Vidya would be a 12th house kind of place. And yes, there must be, well, you know, I have a pretty good second house altogether, I guess, as far as family experience and just, you know, love of good food and all of that, appreciation, all of that. So I have a Parivartana in my chart between the 8th house and the 12th, which can give one the opportunity for, you know, deeper spiritual experience, or just the opportunity to have meditation, deep experience in places of spiritual retreat, the attraction to places of spiritual retreat. So I do have that in the chart, as well as benefic planets aspecting the 12th house. So that's why I get so excited about Arsha Vidya, the people, the just the level of learning, the liveliness of the knowledge.
Well, on that note, Michael, what would you say is the relationship between Jyotish and spirituality?
Well, that, again, thank you. That's a great question. And I would love to hear other people's thoughts on the subject, because it is so important. I would say, you know, right from the outset, my reading, the teachers that I've had, there has been a very profound and consistent understanding that Jyotish is a spiritual science above and beyond anything else. And that, again, when I get right down to it, the purpose of every astrology reading is to elevate, inspire, illuminate the person in what could be said to be a spiritual way. It doesn't mean that every person I read for is asking those bigger questions, but often they are. And Jyotish happens to be a wonderful way to really begin to see maybe the specifics, or see the particular kind of dharma that a person may be meant for in this particular lifetime. That and as you know, Emily, we were trained in the Purusharthas, you know, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. That understanding, and just the concept that in one way or another, we are all in a human body on a spiritual experience, and that the chart can certainly highlight or illuminate the degree to which spiritual activity or the process of seeking in a spiritual way is going to be achieved in a certain lifetime. I mean, for some people, just hard work and supporting a family becomes the supreme spiritual expression of their life. Other people, you get other charts that you get, being in a foundational marriage, having a happy marriage is very much the spiritual expression. And then in other folks, you get people who very, very sincerely want to know about the potential for a spiritual experience, maybe in a more monastic way, or in a way that they are, part of a spiritual community. I mean, I certainly have lots of clients whose experience is taking them in that direction. Maybe even after they've had a working life or a married life, they decide to go in the direction of celibacy and manifesting their spirituality in that way. But the chart, when it's understood, and there's lots of good literature as far as the expression of spirituality, how it is manifested in the Jyotish chart, there's lots out there that helps us, narrow down on that and identify that. So, yeah. I saw a question about distinguishing between harsh speech and outright addiction, if I understand correctly.
In the second pop-up, yes.
Yeah, by means of the second house. My answer to that would be, certainly an addict is capable of speaking harshly or untruthfully, but many people who have, abrupt or slightly rough ways of speaking or expressing themselves are not necessarily addicted. This is, it's an issue of discernment, but one thing that I learned kind of quickly as I was analyzing charts of addicts and alcoholics is we pay attention to sarpadrecanas. Mm-hmm. When sarpadrecanas get involved, sarpadrecanas being second and third of Cancer, first and second of Scorpio, third of Pisces, or those are the five drecanas that I was taught that is in the Brihajataka. When those drecanas are activated, when a house lord is in a sarpadrekana, and including the second house lord, or the second house is afflicted by a planet in Sarpa. Sarpa is where we get caught. And it can be sometimes a glorious expression of Kundalini energy when a person is caught in the spiritual, enlightening process of the activation of Kundalini and all of the manifestation of that energy. But at a lower level, Sarpa energy is where we can get trapped or stuck, and certainly the addictive experience is one of that nature. Mm-hmm. So that would be one of the ways that we might distinguish between just simple, harsh or rough speech as opposed to outright addiction. Knowledge of the nakshatras is very, very important. And those of us who have been blessed with excellent teaching in the field of nakshatras and use the nakshatras, that is another way in, because there are certain nakshatras that can give harsh or sudden speech, or speech without thought ahead of time, just abrupt speech. There are nakshatras that can give that, and there are indications that will give that without necessarily giving addiction. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know if that's exactly what the questioner is wondering about, but that's my way of looking at it. You know, anything in a chart, anything. James Kelleher has this expression when he teaches, it takes 3 logs to build a fire. And that is a wonderful way to think about it. You know, you can see an indication of something once, but you want to learn, you want to know how to see confluence. And of course, Emily, your experience and mine and Saurav and actually, you know, we all came through this process with Penny Farrow, and she was very, very strong on confluence, seeing something more than once over in the chart, seeing something 2, 3, 4, 5 times, the same thing indicated a number of times in the chart. In other words, if you see affliction to the 5th house, which is what goes in and out of the house of the mother, then you see a similar affliction to the 2nd house from the moon. Then you see something afflicting the 2nd house from the 4th lord. Then you will have more confidence in saying, you know, let's say you're an hour or more into the reading and the person is beginning to talk about their early family life, then you might be able to pose a question. You know, I'm just wondering about if you grew up around any sort of addictive behavior, or, you know, wondering about mother's speech patterns or use of substances by mother, you know, if any of that was a factor in your life. That is, you know, it's confluence. I always say, unless I find myself living in a house with 2 or 3 other astrologers, which I don't, but confluence is the next best thing to that. Confluence in the chart, the reinforcement of something going in a certain direction. And almost always, if you know how to look for it and know how it might manifest, you will find confluence around certain predominant themes. You know, to see in a chart, let's say the person is a doctor by profession, you're going to see that in more than one way. You're going to see all of the predominant themes in a chart. You're going to be able to see that more than one way in a chart. So, including addiction.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Thanks, sure.
The Sarpadracanas especially, I feel like that was, that's a real, important piece.
Well, Dracanas in general are another significant way into the chart. Knowing the Dracanas, just as we have to know the nakshatras, knowing each of those 36 Dracanas and what their meaning is and what their symbolism is and what it can bring. What it can bring about in a chart. That Dracanas are a wonderful way to, you know, achieve a certain amount of insight, you know, into a chart. And I'll give a quick example. Tom Brady, the quarterback who was the New England Patriots quarterback for so long and had, you know, huge success. He has 2 planets in the first Dracana of Gemini in the house of career. All right, what is the first Dracana of Gemini? A woman skilled in needlework with hands raised. Now we're talking about Tom Brady, who, you know, could throw the football with such precision. Obviously, use of the hands. Not only use of the hands, but precise use of the hands. So, does Tom Brady take up needlework or crochet work maybe later in his life? Who knows? Maybe. But that in combination with other indications of the chart pulls us in the direction of, for a career, is there anything in the career that brings in use of the hands, maybe with a certain amount of precision? And there you have, you know, a lot about that person. And that is the first Dracana of Gemini. So, you know, again, there are so many ways into the chart and so many ways to achieve some understanding of the chart. It takes patience to work our way through a chart, just like through a difficult crossword puzzle. But, you know, it certainly can be done. And yes, Dracanas, Sarpa Dracanas, other Dracanas, and knowing nakshatras really thoroughly, and they keep on revealing themselves. Nakshatras are very, very subtle, but all of that has become sort of the foundation of how I work in this field of Vedic astrology.
With exquisite finesse.
Well, thank you for that. I always tell people, I don't know, I've learned how to be emphatic, even when I'm wrong. So, so it's important to, for me to learn how to tease through that and make sure that, because, the best learning moments sometimes are when we make certain mistakes or misunderstand something. And yes, there is a certain level of success, but there's also that ongoing learning. For myself, I realized any number of years ago, I didn't start out, and for a long time, I was not really interested in doing Jyotish as a somewhat of a profession. And I also came to understand that as long as I'm working in this field and giving readings, I'm still a student of Vedic astrology. When I find myself no longer a student, then I'm no longer an astrologer, because the greatest trap for the ego is thinking that we know all about something, or we know something so well that we don't have to study anymore. And, if that ever happens, I hope that someone taps me on the shoulder and takes me by the arm and leads me in another direction, because I don't want to be doing Vedic astrology and not studying it. I mean, there's so much there to learn, What did Varaha Mihira supposedly, I think it was him, he's quoted as having said, it's a vast ocean which no one can fathom in one lifetime. And it is very daunting. The more we learn, the more we realize what we don't know.
Michael, thank you so much. I think we're at our time where we want to open the floor to questions. If anyone here has a specific question, now is a great time. You can put it in the chat or simply raise your hand and come forward. And perhaps while we're waiting for people to come up with their questions, I would love to just ask you one more thing, Michael, and that's, in relationship with all this talk about addiction and the fact that the US is in a Rahu dasha, what makes astrology such a great tool to really navigate this ocean of samsara that we are in?
Well, I guess, I think about this kind of thing a lot of the time. This is an excellent question. One of the ways that I have approached astrology or approached Jyotish, I don't think any astrologer could be successful if there wasn't some essential truth to this particular science. And just the idea that if we approach every chart and every bit of learning with some objectivity, I kind of have this attitude, like I sort of challenge Jyotish every day to prove itself. And maybe that's not exactly the right attitude, but I am always curious. I'll get an email or a phone call, can you read my chart? And lots of times it's clients that I've already had a relationship with, but sometimes new clients, and study the chart for a while and get a sense of the person's life. And then in the reading, we go about this process of the person sharing a little bit about themselves, or me telling them what I'm thinking based on their chart. And there is some truth, there's something that comes through. So far in my experience with Vedic astrology, it does tend to prove itself day in, day out. There is some essential truth to the whole thing. Now, where it gets fascinating is if you dive into the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and specifically the sutras involving knowledge of the structure of the universe and knowledge of the movement of planets. Those sutras are very interesting to understand and to navigate, and the whole phenomenon of the solar system, the universe within our own nervous system, which turns out to be the case, I believe, and having been a meditator, a practitioner of meditation for many, many years, you know, I've had a couple of glimpses of that subjective experience. So, and there is some information out there. There is some knowledge or some writing about, you know, the correlation between what is in the human brain and the structure of the solar system. So it turns out we're all walking around with an exact replica or the exact vibrational equivalent of the planetary energy within our own nervous system, and that is accessible to us, you know, through deeper levels of meditation. So this is why it turns out, you know, otherwise, how could something hundreds of millions of miles away have an influence on us? It turns out that, you know, we are blessed with this correlation, maybe is a good way to put it, or the ability to reflect planetary vibrations through our own particular nervous system. And this is why I think so many of us, you know, are drawn towards Vedic astrology and, you know, have a way of suspecting that it is true. So that's a little bit of an esoteric answer, but it is an important piece of knowledge as far as understanding, you know, how and why it works. There's a lovely book by Thomas More, the fellow who wrote Care of the Soul. He has a book called The Planets Within, and that's a very nice book to for someone to avail themselves of, just the understanding of planetary energies in a more internal and subjective way. Yes, you're exactly right, Sarab. It's a vast, vast topic as far as, you know, why is it, you know, what is the internal potential as far as internal manifestation of planetary energy, or the exact replica of the planetary vibration that occurs within our own nervous system. And there is quite a bit of writing about that. There, a fellow named Tony Nader has created some literature around that exact phenomenon. So we've got, I don't know if there are more questions, but certainly I don't want to leave any question unanswered.
There is a question. And the question is, can you please share about some of the ways in which people were able to redeem themselves out of addiction with help from Jyotish?
Yeah, I would say I've had, certainly, you know, over the years, I've had experiences with clients where I would advise them about either their own addictive behavior or the addictive behavior of someone in their life. And they would sort of, you know, it would be like the last straw on the camel's back. You know, someone who maybe is carrying around a suspicion that they're drinking too much or they're too deeply involved with the use of a certain substance. And then they find out, okay, well, here's this guy who does Vedic astrology, and I'll see what he says. And they may not even be consulting me to talk about addiction, but we will work our way around to the subject. My readings tend to be on the long side, between 90 minutes and 2 hours, because it is a lot of times it's within that last half hour that a person says, okay, can I ask you about something else, or I'm wondering if this shows up in the chart, or, I've made reference to it after there's been a level of trust that's built up. And I can be a little blunt, I'll tell somebody, as much promise as there is in this particular chart, all of that promise becomes evaporated with ongoing, use of the addictive substance. In other words, it doesn't matter what career or what marriage or what relationship or how much money is maybe promised in the chart or suggested as being possible, ongoing use of alcohol or other drugs will thoroughly eradicate all of that promise. It will dissolve it. In my personal experience as a substance abuse specialist clinician, I saw both. I saw cases of people who were able to address the illness and get into recovery, and then I saw cases of people who didn't and usually they end up dead. And if not dead, extreme cases like, I remember a guy who was a school principal and a very highly regarded person in the community, and over the years, his process of and he did eventually die, but on the way to dying, he ended up living in his car. And, that sort of thing was not uncommon. And so, it just made me really have a lot of respect for the destructive potential of the addictive illness, where it can take a person as it moves along. But yes, there have been cases, and I've had clients come back and tell me later on, a follow-up reading, or I'll get an email, they'll say, I found my way into a process of recovery, or I'm now attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, or the ones who are, let's say there's another person in their life, so they have found their way into, again, the recovery programs like Al-Anon or Adult Children of Alcoholics, or, anything that offers support for people who are affected by someone else's drinking or drug use. And I do, with some frequency, hear back from people who say, it was helpful for me to have you confirm that, yes, this is in my life, but it also shows up in the chart. And for me to say, absolutely, it's in the chart and it's not going to go away. And there's a way, it's necessary to just address it directly, whether it's someone else's addictive behavior or it's your own. It is important to just recognize it, face it, decide how you will deal with it. It's just like, any other kind of illness, for having a disturbing symptom as far as our health is concerned, and that symptom just doesn't go away, sooner or later we have to deal with it. One very mundane example is a toothache that starts maybe very, very innocently, and okay, a couple aspirin and we're fine, but then over the weeks and months, worse, it's keeping you up at night. Okay, I got to call the dentist. I guess I have to do something about this. And the progression of a lot of illnesses will follow that same course, and including addictive illness. So any more questions that people have? Anything else left over?
I think we got most of the questions, Michael.
Okay.
Perfect timing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, we're up against noon here, which is a good time to stop if everyone feels like we've addressed it. And it's been lovely to be involved in this conversation this morning, and I'm really very much looking forward to being back at Arsha Vidya. And I see that Neelima is there with us, and Neelima, it's wonderful to
Neelima is there. Neelima
have
is there
you in the
with stick.
conversation.
Yes, I have been listening to the whole thing. Very, very nice, Michael. Reminded me of all our days together at the ashram.
Yes. Hopefully there are more on the way, more these days coming.
Well, I am not sure how this, I signed up for the whole thing, but I'm not sure how that's going to work out. just so much going on. Anuj had a little baby girl, and
Yes, congratulations.
thank you. So it's just a lot going on, and we'll see what we can do.
These children are very lucky to have you as the grandmother.
Om Namah Shivaya.
I was just saying that Nilima is there with a stick.
I know. I was just cleaning up because people were coming, and I said, "Well, actually, Michael, we moved to Pittsburgh. You'll have to come and visit us in Pittsburgh."
Yes, I would love to do that, Nilima. Would love to do that. You know, we none of us would be as competent in the realm of astrology. We wouldn't be doing Jyotish half as well if you were not scooping us up after every dinner. We're going back to the classroom. We're going to study tonight. And we would say, no, we'll just take a walk and get some ice cream. No, we're going to the classroom. And that's what Saurabh is referring to. You were cracking the whip. We have to go back and
you were the
go over these
motivator.
principles.
Well, you were the inspirer for the whole thing, so it was nice.
I would say that you were the one in that role, and the whip cracker.
Well,
and just pulling us over to the classroom. And no, I'm so comfortable here in the dining room, and it's a nice evening. We'll take a walk. And no, Nilima would be emphatic. Take us by the hand, lead us back to the classroom.
You also have Jonathan and Ramji from the cohort.
Yes.
You can.
where is Ramji? I didn't see Ramji.
David B. Norwell.
Yes, I know, but I'm trying to. Oh yeah, I see him there, but I don't see his picture. Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Jonathan, anything?
Nice to see all of you.
Yes, same here, Jonathan.
And Michael, if we want to get your book, is it better if you send it or if we just get it on Amazon?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's on Amazon Kindle. We're actually about to revise it. Couple of little tweaks in the book. So you may want to wait a couple weeks.
All right.
Yeah. Especially with the Kindle version. So, which we're about to change. So, in getting the first edition out there and then hearing back from people and just, of course, going back over and reading it myself, like, there's things I want to say slightly differently. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's there and it's available.
It almost feels like we're back at our Vidya group.
I know it does. It reminded me of those days, Jonathan. It does.
We just need a chai.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
I see Dr. Charak is on as well. Doctor, if you want to start your video maybe and talk a few words. And Ramji, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, I see Ramji now. Very nice.
I'm sorry, I joined a little late.
No, the recording is available, Dr. Charak, and we did have a good time. And
Yes, Dr.
I had
Charak.
some misconception about time actually.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Dr. Charak. Looking forward to seeing you.
Oh, yes, great. Thank
you. Yes.
I'm coming over to see you.
Well, the same for me. I know you're traveling much more distance, but the motivation is just as strong.
Thank you.
Ramji, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
So nice to see Ramji. Namaste, Ramji.
Namaste.
Namaste, Dr. Charak.
Namaste.
Namaste for all. Thank you for this wonderful discussion, and
Namaste.
looking forward to seeing everyone next week.
We are about to end. Hey Pamrose, thanks for opening your video. If others, if you want to just kind of open your video and we can probably take a quick screenshot of it. I would love to do that.
Yeah, that would be great. Lovely to see. Namaste to everyone.
Elizabeth, I don't know if you guys can, or Steve, Sarasji. Looks like everybody's shy. I'll just take a screenshot of it as it is.
Maybe they still have their hair in curlers.
I know.
There we go.
Yes, there is Elizabeth. And I am going to take one more screenshot now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
So thank you, Saurav. I think now we are near to the closing of the session.
Okay.
So definitely we are looking forward to see all of you in the Jyotish conference. If you are come and if you're coming in person, it will be really nice to see and have tea, as Emily was talking about being together. But if not, at least online you will be there. So see you guys, everybody. It's again starting from the Thursday morning, 8:15. And Michael Sugarman is speaking, like, especially two very important topic, one about spirituality, other about eyesight. And with that, I also want to say thank to Michael for sharing such a brilliant information and so much of thing which people have a concern about at this time, is like how to go ahead and solve it. I'm not sure how much we can solve it, but at least in the beginning we can identify it to go ahead. So with that thought, Saurav, I would like to request you for the closing mantra, and we'll go ahead.
You can order me, but that's okay. Start. Please bring your hands closer to your chest. Take a deep breath in. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhave. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh and
Okay,
Meenakshi.
namaskar.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Michael. Thank you, Dr.
Bye,
Charak.
Vinay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Michael.
Emily.
Thank you,
Bye,
Pam.
Ramji.
Bye.
Namaste.
Ramji, good to see you
Namaste.
after a long
Thank
time.
you.